Real quick before we roll this footage, Senator Patty Murray just looked Pete Hegseth directly in the face and told him that he and the president value defense contractors more than they value American families. She cited Eisenhower. She cited the 13 American service members killed in a war the American people overwhelmingly opposed. She cited the $29 billion already spent with no real cost breakdown provided to Congress. She cited $4, $5, $6, $7 gas prices. She cited the fact that Hegseth cannot even tell her what it cost to repair the 228 American military structures that Iran hit during this conflict. And Hegseth sat there and told her damage to U.S. facilities is not something he has a cost estimate for right now. Watch this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the war in Iran has not only cost 13 American service member lives, it is also costing American taxpayers dearly. Tens of billions of dollars and counting, and that's money that could be helping people perhaps get health care. But instead, we're paying for bombs dropped in a war that American people overwhelmingly oppose. Now, earlier this morning, I know that your team testified Trump's war with Iran cost $29 billion so far. That is $29 billion blown on a war of choice, and that's what it would have cost, actually, to save the ACA tax credits. But as my colleagues have already stated, what is concerning as well is it seems quite clear that that cost estimate is suspiciously low. Now, your acting comptroller suggested that damage to U.S. facilities was not factored into that figure. It is clear that there has been extensive damage to American military assets. New reporting from the Washington Post and others indicates that Iran has hit at least 228 structures or pieces of equipment at U.S. military sites. Can you tell us what the cost of damage done to U.S. facilities is because of this war?
Well, I think Jay covered pretty clearly what we can or cannot share, but I would simply respond that, and I think it's an important point, considering what the president is undertaking, is what is the cost of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon? And the fact that this president's been willing to make a historic and courageous choice to confront that, it comes with cost, and we recognize that.
I understand what your judgment is. We have a judgment as well, and I'm asking if you can tell us, and at what point you can tell us what the cost of damage done to U.S. facilities is because of this war.
Yeah, ma'am, thanks for the question. So for future posture in the Middle East, we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know how we're going to design these bases.
The damage to date, you do not have any cost estimate on it at all?
For the military construction, I don't have a cost estimate to provide you at this time.
Well, when will we get that?
Again, it depends on what the future posture is, how we decide to construct those bases.
To date, you know what has happened to date. We can't get that number, and that is a real concern to us. Our job is to appropriate dollars, and we're just told it's coming, and we don't get it, so it's very hard to do our budgets. And right now, Mr. Secretary, people are paying $4, $5, even $6, $7 for gas, and American taxpayers are now on the hook as well for paying for this disastrous war. You're spending families' hard-earned tax dollars on a war that many strongly oppose, and you're forcing people to pay more at the pump, and yet you're not even providing a real breakdown for the cost of this war so far. We have no real details, you have indicated that, and yet now you want Congress to send you $1.5 trillion more. To me, that is unacceptable, and I hope our Republican colleagues will join us in not only rejecting that absurd request, but in insisting that the American people get the actual answers on how much money, their money, we are spending on this. Now, let me turn and say, Secretary Hegseth, the president has called Medicaid, Medicare, and child care little scams and said, quote, "We're fighting wars, we cannot take care of daycare." I'm just trying to understand that. Is it your position, since you're asking taxpayers for another $500 billion for the war, that American families should be forced to give up child care and health coverage so that you can have $1.5 trillion for this budget?
Senator, that's not my department. I certainly support this, and I also support the president's efforts to find and remove fraud wherever possible in a general sense.
I'm not talking
and we do that
fraud.
in our department as well.
I'm not talking about fraud. I actually asked whether an American family should lose their health care or their child care to pay for this budget. That is literally what the president suggested.
The president has proposed a historic $1.5 trillion budget that will defend the nation and confront threats like Iran, which previous presidents allowed to happen, as Senator Graham pointed out.
Well,
Previous administrations said they wanted to take care of this problem, and they did not, and he's doing
this committee, the question in front of the American people is, what are they being asked to give up for this $1.5 trillion? That's where I was talking about. And lastly, Mr. Secretary, your budget request cuts through Trump's ramblings and really, to me, makes the truth clear that you and the president don't value families as much as you value defense contractors. You want to increase the war budget.
I mean, every family at Dover. Okay, don't tell me we don't care about families. We sure do.
Mr.
And we take care of them in every way we possibly can.
I'm asking you about taxpayer dollars that everybody has. So when we've been to war before, we have asked people to do victory gardens. We've asked them to pay more. You are not doing that. You are asking for $1.5 trillion, which means something else has to be given up. That is what this committee is looking at. You want to increase the war budget for the next year by $500 billion. That is taxpayer money that could be used to feed families or build new affordable homes or wipe out some diseases completely or increase child investments 20 times over. But you are asking us to blow it all on war, and that's not even counting the money that you have spent bombing Iran or that you may still request in a separate supplemental. And to me, this budget wasn't even strategically crafted. $1.5 trillion is like the president decided that was the number and you all filled in the blanks. So what I'm here today to say is you asked for a massive laundry list of unnecessary spending. It's a huge payday for defense contractors, and you still don't even ask to give DOD civilian workers a pay raise. And to me, this is absurd. I know you do not care what I have to say. So let me quote you someone you might actually listen to. President Eisenhower. He said, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children." That is what this budget proposal is asking. It's going to leave Americans cold and hungry to fund Trump's war and make defense contractors a fortune. So that is why I hope this committee throws that in the trash and comes together with a budget that works for all American families. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Welcome back to Winner's Breakdowns. I'm Winner. And if that clip did not hit you with the full weight of what is happening right now to American families and American taxpayers and American service members and American democratic governance, then I need you to watch it one more time, because what Murray documented in that exchange is not a partisan argument. It is a series of documented facts about how this administration is spending your money on a war you did not ask for without telling you what it costs and without asking you what you are willing to give up to pay for it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you thought the moment that clip ended, because I read every single one, and today I genuinely want to know what you felt watching Murray say those things to Hegseth's face. Let's get into every single layer of this, because I want to start with a number that I think deserves to be the headline of every news story about this conflict, and almost certainly is not. $29 billion. That is the administration's own cost estimate for the Iran war so far, and Murray flagged immediately that the number looks suspiciously low because, according to her acting comptroller's own testimony, damage to U.S. facilities was not even factored into that figure. Not factored in. We are being told the war has cost $29 billion, and that accounting does not include the cost of repairing or replacing the American military structures and equipment that Iran hit during the conflict. The Washington Post and other outlets have reported that Iran struck at least 228 structures or pieces of equipment at U.S. military sites. 228. And when Murray asked Hegseth what the cost of that damage is, he said he does not have a cost estimate to provide at this time. Let me make sure that lands with the weight it deserves. The Secretary of Defense of the United States cannot tell the Senate Appropriations Committee what it has cost to repair or replace the American military equipment and infrastructure damaged in an active war that the administration chose to start. He does not have a cost estimate. He cannot give a timeline for when he will have one. He says it depends on future basing posture decisions that have not been made yet. And simultaneously, this administration is asking Congress to approve a $1.5 trillion defense budget and a potential separate supplemental request on top of that. Think about what that means from a basic governance and fiscal accountability standpoint. You're being asked to write a check for $1.5 trillion to a department that cannot tell you what the war is currently fighting actually costs. You are being asked to approve a defense budget from an administration that does not know or will not say what it costs to fix the military infrastructure damaged in a conflict that is already underway and that American taxpayers are already paying for. The Appropriations Committee's job is to allocate federal resources responsibly, and that responsibility requires information. You cannot make responsible budget decisions without knowing what things cost. And Hegseth could not or would not provide that information. Murray said, "We were just told it is coming, and we do not get it." That is not a minor transparency complaint. That is a senator describing a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch on questions of fiscal accountability for an active military conflict. Congress has the constitutional power of the purse. That power is meaningless if the executive branch can conduct a war, accumulate costs in the tens of billions of dollars, damage hundreds of pieces of American military infrastructure, and refuse to provide the cost accounting that Congress needs to exercise its oversight responsibility. And the gas prices. I want to spend real time on this because I think it is the piece of this hearing that is most directly connected to the daily lives of every American watching this video, and the piece that has gotten the least sustained attention in the political coverage of this conflict. People are paying $4, $5, $6, $7 for gas. Murray said it clearly and directly, and I want to make sure it registers because behind that number are real families making real decisions about whether they can afford to drive to work, whether they can afford to heat their homes, whether they can afford to get their kids to school or to doctor's appointments, or to anywhere else that requires burning fuel that now costs more than it has in years because of a war that American polling consistently shows the public overwhelmingly opposed. Every family paying $5 gas right now is paying a war tax they never voted for. They never approved this conflict. They were not asked. They cannot opt out. They fill up their tank and they pay whatever it costs, and a significant portion of that cost is attributable to the disruption of global energy markets caused by a war that the administration decided to fight on their behalf without meaningfully consulting the people whose financial lives are being disrupted by the decision. That is not democracy. That is a government that has decided it knows better than its citizens what risks and costs are worth bearing and is imposing those costs on those citizens without their meaningful consent. And then Murray moved to the domestic budget trade-offs, and this is where I think the moral center of her argument became most clear and most devastating. She referenced Trump's remarks calling Medicaid, Medicare, and child care little scams, and saying we are fighting wars and cannot take care of daycare. And she asked Hegseth directly, "Is it your position that American families should be forced to give up child care and health coverage so that you can have $1.5 trillion for this defense budget?" Hegseth deflected by saying domestic programs are not his department. Murray immediately called out the deflection. She said she was not asking about fraud. She was asking about budget trade-offs, about what families are being asked to sacrifice to fund this level of military spending. And the trade-off question is the right question, and it is the question that this administration has been working very hard to avoid answering honestly since the beginning. A budget is a moral document. It reflects the priorities of the government producing it. When you propose $1.5 trillion in defense spending, you are making a choice about what that money will not be spent on. You're choosing not to spend it on health care for people who cannot afford it. You're choosing not to spend it on childcare that makes it possible for families to work. You're choosing not to spend it on affordable housing or disease research or education or any of the other things that make American families more secure and more prosperous. Every dollar that goes to this defense budget is a dollar that does not go somewhere else. That is not a political argument. That is arithmetic. Murray said $1.5 trillion is what it would cost to increase child investments 20 times over. It is what it would cost to wipe out some diseases completely. It is what it would cost to build new affordable homes for families who cannot afford the housing market. And instead of any of those things, it is going to defense contractors, not to civilian DoD workers who Murray pointed out are not even getting a pay raise in this budget. To defense contractors, the companies that build the bombs being dropped in a war that American polling shows most Americans did not want fought. And Murray's accusation that the budget was not even strategically crafted, that the president decided on $1.5 trillion as a number and the administration filled in the blanks, is one of the most serious governance criticisms that can be leveled at a defense budget request. A legitimate defense budget starts with a strategic assessment. What threats does the country face? What capabilities are needed to address those threats? What does it cost to build and maintain those capabilities? And from those answers, you build a budget figure. What Murray was describing is the opposite process, a political number decided first and a justification built backward from it. That is not defense planning. That is defense theater. And the American taxpayer is being asked to write a $1.5 trillion check for it. Hegseth's response when Murray accused him of valuing defense contractors over military families was to tell her not to say he does not care about families and his cite Dover. And I want to address that response directly because I think it reveals something important about the administration's approach to this entire conversation. Citing Dover, the military mortuary where fallen service members are received, as evidence that the administration cares about military families is an emotional appeal that does not address the fiscal and policy substance of what Murray was asking. Of course, the people who make decisions about going to war should feel the weight of the deaths those decisions produce. That is not the question. The question is whether a $1.5 trillion defense budget that cannot account for war damage costs, and that is funded in part by cutting programs that ordinary American families depend on, represents the right set of priorities for a government that is supposed to serve all of its citizens. And the Eisenhower quote. I want to close on this because I think Murray's decision to end with it was one of the most powerful and most historically resonant choices she could have made in that hearing room. Eisenhower, a five-star general who commanded Allied forces in World War II and then served as president, said that every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. He said this world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. This was not a pacifist or an anti-military voice. This was the supreme Allied commander in the greatest military conflict in human history, warning that military spending always comes at a human cost that extends far beyond the battlefield. And Murray invoked him not to argue against a strong defense, but to argue that there's a limit to what military spending is worth, and that a budget that cannot account for its own costs while simultaneously cutting the programs that keep families fed and healthy and housed has exceeded that limit by a substantial margin. Democrats need to keep doing exactly what Murray did in that hearing room. Keep asking for the cost accounting that the administration refuses to provide. Keep connecting the defense budget to the domestic trade-offs that real families are living with every day at the gas pump and in the doctor's office and in the child care center. Keep invoking the constitutional power of the purse as the real and meaningful oversight tool it is supposed to be, rather than allowing it to be hollowed out by an executive branch that asks for trillions without providing the transparency those requests require. Keep making the moral case for a budget that serves all Americans rather than primarily serving the defense contractors who benefit most from $1.5 trillion in military spending. Murray said what needed to be said. She said it to Hegseth's face. She said it with Eisenhower's words and with the documented facts of $29 billion spent, 228 structures hit, no cost estimate available, $5 gas, 13 service members dead, and a $1.5 trillion budget request with blanks filled in to match a number decided before the strategy was built. Every American who is paying that $5 gas and watching their health care and child care programs get cut to pay for this war deserves to hear what she said in that room. So drop a comment and tell me what hit you hardest in that clip. Was it the $29 billion estimate that does not include damage to U.S. facilities? Was it the 228 structures hit with no cost estimate available? Was it the gas prices and the war tax families are paying without consent? Was it the child care and health care trade-off question that Hegseth would not answer? Was it Murray's accusation that this budget values defense contractors over families? Was it the Eisenhower quote and the moral weight it carried at the end of the exchange? I want to hear all of it because this is exactly the conversation Winners Breakdowns was built for. If you believe the American people deserve honest cost accounting for a war fought in their name, if you believe a government budget is a moral document that reflects real choices about whose needs matter most, and if you think Patty Murray said everything that needed to be said in that room with the facts and the courage and the historical weight it deserved, then you know exactly what to do right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and share this video with every American who is paying $5 gas and deserves to know exactly why. This has been Winners Breakdowns. Stay informed, stay outraged about the right things, hold power accountable at every level, and I will catch you in the next one.